Nirav, thank you so much for coming on the show today and talking to our community and being here. What an honor to have you. It's great to see you.
Well, it's a pleasure being here, Clint. Pleasure being here today, and honor to meet you as well.
Hey, let's start with how your background and how you got into business and starting companies and leading companies and what drove you to this career.
Yeah. I think look about starting, and I'll talk a little bit about the starting. I guess this is my first time CEO gig. While I've been in the industry for almost 3 decades, this is the first time that I've played the role of a CEO, and I'll say that it's been all exciting and fun. And I just completed my third anniversary. So I think look, this whole drive and passion of trying to do business building has always been something that's with me for a long period of time, and I'm pretty excited and pleased with the performance so far, and the way we've really built a career through this, and more importantly, the impact we've been able to create to all of our stakeholders, our employees, our customers, and the communities that we work in.
So, what's the history of Bristlecone? Am I saying that right? By the way, it's
Yeah, you are. So Bristlecone has a very, very interesting history and a long history, and coincidentally, we are celebrating our 25th anniversary this year. So we've been around in the industry for 25 years, and for businesses as like ours, was started by a bunch of passionate executives that worked in the world of SAP, and this is back in 98, that they decided to come out and start this Silicon Valley startup. And so we continue to be, even today, headquartered out of San Jose, while I'm personally based out of Dallas. But I think that's where we started as a Silicon Valley startup, and the journey since then has been fantastic. We are over 2,800 people. It's in 94 that the Mahindra Group decided to buy this asset because the value and the passion that we saw clearly, we thought we could meaningfully create a huge impact, not just within the Mahindra Group, but for the industry in terms of how the supply chain could have its own space. And long until the COVID was hit is when we realized the impact and the value, because we can't be more excited about playing in the world of supply chain and digital in helping a lot of our clients. So that's a little bit of our history in terms of how we came about. Very bunch of passionate leaders and the team that are working day in, day out on harder issues to solve, like supply chain.
Mahindra has this kind of famous philosophy around RISE, and I'm guessing you guys adhere to it as well at Bristlecone. Can you tell us a little bit more about RISE and why it's such an impactful philosophy around business?
Absolutely. That was one of the biggest factors what drove me personally towards a culture that believed in the RISE philosophy. And the RISE philosophy is really focused around the culture of how we think about empowering others and letting others rise and letting them achieve their outcomes. And it's only in letting others rise is we believe that we rise together as a company. So I think we've been extremely passionate about our RISE philosophy. Clearly for us in Bristlecone, and to me as an individual leader, I think that resonates very, very strongly with sort of our cultural beliefs and where we should be focusing on creating the impact, not just on our clients and our employees, but also on the communities that we serve.
Being so involved in supply chain and digital enterprises and things like that must have been fascinating during the pandemic. What did you learn during the pandemic?
Well, I think first is, resiliency is one thing that I would say was and very, very interesting aspects of humans at large that we could learn. I actually feel it's the not just the impact of what happened with the virus, but how we as humans really learned to stand back up, in my opinion, is the most and the biggest learning that we've taken. And we did not expect that supply chain would be a little bit of a consequence of what happened in COVID, because when it comes to commercial world, we realized and saw that most products, as they came out of the COVID play, that the demand really spiked, and supply chain took a little bit of a toll in terms of not being able to have the products be available at the right place, right time. And most organizations started to really look at the weaknesses that existed in the system in supply chain. So to me, I think two big, I call human resiliency and corporate resiliency. And corporate resiliency, by way of saying it, is essentially that you can only do so much in predicting where the world and demand will be. But what you can do for sure is that if you do get knocked down, and we believe in that statement when we say that thrive on change, essentially we are saying that change is inevitable. It's going to happen no matter what you try to do to prevent it. I think what you can do is to build a level of resiliency within your organizations, as I believe humans have now built a very strong sense of resiliency to sort of fight back with everything that's happened. So to me, there's a lot of parallel with what happened with humans in post-COVID mindset. And I think the same mindset exists right now in corporate, where resiliency becomes the number one priority over everything else.
How resilient do you think the supply chain is now, just generally, and how resilient do you think organizations are post-COVID?
I think, look, this is a journey, and I think I keep saying this to a lot of our clients, that when you hit upon a problem, you realize, you start to look at how to prevent it. It's like one of the CEOs, our customer CEOs, recently told me one point which was brilliant, and he says, I said to him, saying, Mark, how do you really look at this market environment where there's a softness in the demand? Interest rates are significantly high, trying to contain inflation. And what does this mean to your organization? And he gave me a brilliant answer. And he said that, it's not the question of if, it's a question of when the markets bounce back. And the level of confidence that he had was to say that we know for sure that the markets are going to get better and the demand environment is going to come out better. But one of the things we want to learn from what happened in the post-COVID, I call the revenge phase, where the spending really spiked up, is I don't want supply chain to break again. And so one of the biggest input from him was, I want to prioritize the supply chain. I want to really make sure that my supply chain is resilient. Now, to answer your question, while they feel confident that they will not be able to get knocked down by supply chain issues, they are equally aware of the systemic issues that exist in how the supply chain system had been left out in the legacy environment for such a long time. So clearly they understand the modernization of supply chain is a many-year, probably a decade's journey. And so you are going to constantly prioritize investments in the supply chain area to modernize your estate. And whether that means building new ERP systems, installing new systems of visibility, taking advantage of the cool new technologies of the AI, the generative AI, as well as the IoTs, which increases sort of an awareness of your network and where your supply chain really operates today. So to me, I feel we are still in very early days. The most recent, one of the most recent McKinsey surveys says that 80% of supply chain systems will be AI-led in the next 3 years, compared to 30% predicted just before COVID. So you can see how COVID has really accelerated the digital adoption, and that increasingly customers are prioritizing AI and supply chain to be their number one priorities, to really make sure that their journey of modernization continues, and that they lead and make supply chain a little bit of a competitive advantage. In the past, supply chain was like do no harm approach, saying let it continue and make sure that we get the products and on-time deliveries as we expect. But today, I think increasingly customers think of supply chain as strategic priority and make sure that that is a competitive advantage.
I mean, and using Bristlecone, I'm sure that they can control supply chain a lot better. But I wonder, like, how often are you thinking of like geopolitical issues? How often are like people asking you these types of questions? How much of supply chain can you really control? Given, like, I mean, you for some reason you probably are thinking like, hey, about the war in Ukraine or China and Taiwan, like all these types of things, right? And you're running a company, but you also got to think about these geopolitical issues. How does that affect business and confidence in supply chain?
Well, Clint, that's a great question, and I think I'm going to answer it the way I have answered to many of my work colleagues that they've asked me about. What's my view of the world? I think the world is going through four big transitions. And I say the world because this is beyond supply chain, this is beyond one company's realm, and it's actually the four big transitions. One, we are going through a massive AI transition. And what that means is everything in and around our world, we are going to see become more AI leverage, more technology leveraged, more prediction leverage. So that's one big transition. The second is I call the green transition. And this transition is real. It's happening. I think there might be some bumps on the road. I mean, in terms of the pace at which the transition happens, but I can collectively see the world is really taken on itself. And more importantly, the younger generation is the one that has really caught on and believed in it. So once the consumer and demands really, your customers start to really demand that climate action, you will see that. So to me, that is a second big transition. The third, and you said that your point is a little geopolitical, I call decoupling of the supply chain. And what I mean really by that is, or the decoupling of the world, you can call it as, because the macro issues, the geopolitical issues are almost a constant thing to be around. And no longer a country or a nation or a state or a company should rely on a static set of assumptions, which essentially means that this decoupling of supply chain is happening, and you will have to bake in the macro dynamics while designing your supply chain. And so you no longer can make an assumption that what works today will actually work 5 years from now. And so you're in a constant change to what I call rewire your supply chain now, to prepare and make sure that your demand is not missing on products and services that you have to supply for. So I think, to me, the third big transition is what I call the decoupling of supply chain. And inherently inside that transition is the macro issues to play out for the set of products and services that you are selling to your customers, in terms of where your network lies, in terms of products and where you source from. And the final, which I think is the most important but the most important one, is I call the human transition. We as humans have to kind of learn to deal with these three big transitions and adapt to that. And so if this is going to be the real state to be, that as humans, how are you going to really prepare yourself, your kids, your colleagues, your organizations to deal with these three big mega transitions? Not just as somebody who is contributing to build in that transitions, but also even as users. Climate action affects everybody out there, every individual out there in the world, right? When you get hit with this natural disasters, I mean, it doesn't look at who is rich, poor, gender, ethnicity, or any which way you look at it. It just hits everybody at the same time, much like COVID. So I think in that conversation, I feel that we as humans have to deal with what I call a transition, which is almost like saying the humans that will transition better are the ones that can manage the three other transitions in a very meaningful way. Sorry for a very long answer, Clint, but I actually felt that's the best way I'm thinking about where the world is going to go and how everything is interconnected in some form on those four transitions.
No, that's super interesting. It's super fascinating. And number four, the human transition, ties to your number one, which is artificial intelligence. How are you thinking about AI, this boon in AI, particularly since ChatGPT kind of caught the world by storm? Although we kind of
Yeah.
pretend like ChatGPT invented AI in like December of 22, but you know this is something that's been around for a long time, and you've probably been working on even a lot longer than most companies. How do you think about this transition that humans are about to make from status quo to AI being a big part of our lives?
Yeah. So let me first start with a little bit of a context on saying that I'm a firm believer in AI, and I think, but I'm a firm believer in what I call responsible AI. And so, like all pieces of technology and all things in life, there's always a good side and a bad side. So I think there are the good thing is that we humans are very quick to spot the weaknesses of anything. You ask your son, if I were to ask you also in the same vein, saying, tell me how many things are red in color in the room that you're sitting in, it's easy for you to spot because you can actually look at them and say, okay, here are the things that are red. Essentially, and as by nature, um, we are very good at spotting the issues. And so the way you think about it is that you have a new pieces of tool and technology where we are also starting to get better at knowing the weaknesses of it. And if you have that, and then you can contain that, then I think you are in a place that you actually can let the good part of that stuff meaningfully help. And I think this is a very disruptive play of generative AI as well as AI in general, right? I think I'm a firm believer that that is the first transition I listed, and that's happening and that's real. It's going to happen. Now, whether you play part to it, whether you meaningfully be aware and you meaningfully contribute to that in a way that it can be adopted, is the right way I think about the human transition. And I actually call the other name I have for the human transition is called the attitude transitions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reason why I have that is there's a much in our attitude towards all of these other transitions that actually has an important role to play. So if you, as an individual, have the right mindset and the right attitude towards the other three transitions, I think we are going to be in a lot better place faster. Transitions are going to happen no matter whether we are in it or not. But I think the question of the pace as to how fast you can really get to that is a factor of our attitude and how we believe uh, we are going to play a role in those three attritions. So I think, in my opinion, my advice to individuals is always that um, be very well aware of the downsides, the weaknesses, um, but use it to make you a smarter decision maker, a smarter user of it. It was like people at times say that, hey, don't give an iPad to a 2 year old or a 3 year old. I mean, why is that? Is just because you feel there are a lot of other things to do, and so as humans you should have a balance of knowing what to do without gadgets and what to do with gadgets, so you have a very complete life as such, right? So I think
Yeah.
I would always say never run away from knowing the weaknesses, but just take it with a little bit of clarity that it makes you a better person knowing the darker side of certain tech.
The second transition is really interesting too. This green transition, and it's probably somewhat controversial, at least in the political realm. And I
Yeah.
know, like, there's been a lot of debates, and ESG type things have been politicized, and things of that nature. How do you think about all of that?
Well, I think so. This is one thing that we are completely united across the Mahindra Group on the belief that we are going to drive and we're going to play a very active role in pushing for climate change. And so, uh, couldn't agree more with you on the political aspects of it because, economic aspects play an important role. I don't think anybody disagrees that they hate the extreme weathers that are impacting our world. I don't think anybody disagrees on the fact that it is happening. I mean, that is statistically proven that we are seeing extreme weathers all around the world. So that is the fact. Now, who plays what role and how fast you do it to reverse that isn't the good thing for the entire world. And I see uh, there is no disconnect on that point of view. I think if people have disagreement on the problem itself, then I can get it. I don't think problem is disagreed by many, but I think how you solve for it is a slightly different conversation. So I think I look at it and say that the realization of the issue is there. The question is, how do you solve it? There's a bit of that political angle coming in to say how do you solution to solve for it. But I think I broadly look at it and say that look, you as individual, as a buyer of of the world, I mean, you're spending money, your hard-earned money out there. I mean, you can make an impact on that by just simply buying that are more supportive of the climate transition, right? So I think you as individual, as a worker in the corporate world, can always make an impact. In our case, in Mahindra's, we are going above and beyond that. We are not just pushed ourselves to really commit to be totally green, much ahead of the global, the UN mandate and the India mandate. So we are much ahead in that commitment for us from our side, but also equally important, we are also supporting a lot of our clients by having sustainability and green offerings. So we are now working with many of our clients to think about supply chain and sourcing from a climate lens. And so if they are really very, very mindful of that, then I think we will get to a better place. So I think there is a politicization, but I think remember politicization is in terms of how you solve it as against not agreeing on the problem. It's two different
Right.
things.
Yes, yes, exactly. I'm glad you said it that way. You mentioned you're based in Dallas, but the company is headquartered in San Jose. I wonder how you're thinking about work from home and remote work and hybrid and all of this type of stuff.
Yeah, well, so um, the future of workforce is a very evolving thing, in my opinion, because I think there are, like with all negative events, there are always things to learn, and I think I've learned the fact that hybrid is here to stay. Um, uh, COVID taught us to go to the other extreme where you can just be, shelled in your kind of four walls and work for a long period of time. But I'm not sure if that's the most healthy way to think about it from a mental health standpoint. So I actually feel that hybrid is very real. It's here to stay. I don't think you're going to go into an extreme world that it's all in office or all at home. So you're going to find a middle ground. And I think every company is taking what is the right solution for them. You're a creative company, you're going to bring a lot of creative functions together because that's the best way you assume that the human productivity is at its best in certain environments. So some things are done better by sitting together in an office space, and so those functions will eventually graduate towards that. But I do believe that there are a whole bunch of things that actually can work from anywhere, and it actually is an advantage for a lot of employees to think about it. So we're kind of ourselves at a place where we've said that we're going to give some more time for the hybrid world, and think the jury is still out on where it will finally land. But I think my better answer tells me that I think either which way we're going to be very comfortable going. And so we're not that fixated about it, and we're just taking as we go along. I mean, if 80% of my customers come and say, I need all of your teams to be in office servicing me, I think we'll have no choice. We'll move it.
Since taking the role of CEO, what have you learned about leadership that surprised you, and what have you learned about leadership that you knew was part of leading a company or leading people or setting a mission?
And so I think that's a very deep question, and I'm going to try to respond in some form, a little bit more progressive thinking in that way. I see. Look, I think surprises to me. Look, leadership is a learning journey. I don't feel as a leader you stop learning. So to me, I think the greatest source of learning, particularly with my current role, is this idea of trying to run a private company with a public company mindset. How do
Mm.
you do that, right? So you think of it that way, that if you're a public company, you are sort of driving a level of accountability where every 3 months you have to get in front of your investors, uh, kind of answering what you said you're going to do, whether you did that or not. And so they are testing you on your commitment and your promise every 3 months. I think as a private company, you sometimes lose that sense of accountability, and so you assume you have a little bit of space, and that takes you in a place which somewhat doesn't always drive the best performance. So I think I always believe that if you know how to operate a private company with a public company mindset, I think that's a very different challenge in itself. So I think to me, my big set of learning in being the CEO for Bristlecone is to driving that sense of accountability while keeping a lot of good things around empowerment, leadership progression, vibrant cultures, and so forth have to stay no matter which company you are in, what type of company you are in. But there are sometimes you come with that challenge. And I think in our functional challenge for us is really on supply chain and how can we really play a very impactful and meaningful role in the modernization journey. That's the early problem statement I talked about. And so how can I lead with that conversation is that I think otherwise I feel leadership is always a learning journey. And so you learn every single day in life, and you take good calls. I mean, you take all calls with good intent. Some ends up being the right calls and some don't end up being the right calls. And part of the thing is to fail fast and learn from your mistakes and build those concepts and go forward. It's like Clay Christensen says it beautifully, right? Nobody better than him in saying it, that all of these are theories. When a person is sharing their point of view, there is a theory they have built, and they have a theory about if you do these things, you get this outcome. And the surprise comes in when you go through a different path and you get the same outcome, or sometimes you get a different path and you get a better outcome. So, and I think people start to learn on those theories, and they believe that that could be a way to really deploy and solve certain problems. So I think leadership is, in my opinion, an important role, and no leaders stop learning. I mean, you just sort of have to constantly look at uh, what works and what doesn't work. And I think you should look at not just what works and doesn't work from your lens, but also learn from others, in terms of the good things and the bad things that they make the call.
Nirav, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak with us. This has been so fascinating, and the way you think about the world and leadership and technology is just so beautiful. I love it. We end every interview the exact same way at CEO.com, and that is here we believe the chances one gives are just as important as the chances one takes. And I wonder when you hear that, who comes to mind that may have given you a chance?
Um, I have a couple of names that um, come to my mind. I would say that I always cherish the relationships I've had with them, and two of them have been my bosses in my past life on the work front. One is one of the person was when I was back in India. His name is Mahesh. He gave me a chance to be a business unit head for the first time in my life, and I thought that was a little bit ahead of my own expectations that I will get to do that. I used to be a developer, project person working on projects, and he took a chance on me to run a business unit. And there's another person that comes to my mind, which is my second phase when I came to the US, Raj Mehta. Um, he was the COO at Cognizant, and he took the chances on me running what I call multiple units and markets, which used to be called the CMT. Um, and I would say that there is a chance taken by me on me by Mahindra's on me being the first time CEO. So I would say that you could almost never reflect back on your success without identifying those individuals. And I couldn't agree more with you on this point that um, you need people to take chances on, and you should always be somebody encouraging of those as you are taking your success story forward.
Nirav, thank you again so much for joining us today. Appreciate everything, and we'll continue to track Bristlecone and your success. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you, Clint. Pleasure talking to you. Appreciate it. Enjoyed the conversation.